The name of the book is Princess Anne County, Virginia, Its Contributions and Sacrifices to the War Between the States. I wrote that book because I was intrigued as to what went on in this area during the war. I had done a little research on my family and found out that they participated in that war, and they participated on the side of the Confederacy. My great-great-great-grandfather was Edgar A. Burroughs, was a Methodist minister in Princess Anne County. In April of 1863, he was in Captain John Fentress's local cavalry militia. He and Captain Fentress went to Richmond. They petitioned then Colonel Dimmick, who was in charge of the state armory in Richmond, in anticipation of the war coming to Princess Anne County. And when Virginia went to its first secession convention in early April 1861, each county in the state of Virginia had to send a delegate to the secession convention in Richmond. Edgar was elected as alternate. The first secession convention that Virginia had, they didn't get anywhere with it. They didn't vote to secede, they didn't vote not to secede. It was kind of a stalemate kind of a thing. 2 weeks later, Virginia called for another secession convention. Former Governor Henry Wise had stayed in Richmond to the first secession convention to politic even further about the secession of Virginia. So when the second secession convention convened, the folks of Princess Anne County sent their alternate to that convention, who was Edgar A. Burroughs. At that time, the secession deemed it necessary for the state of Virginia to secede. Virginia seceded. Edgar quickly came back and mustered in a cavalry company. Company A, 5th Virginia Cavalry. They were stationed along the coastline of old Princess Anne County, today's modern-day Virginia Beach, from the Ocean View area all the way to the North Carolina line or border. May of 1862, Norfolk and the surrounding areas and counties, Princess Anne County being one of those counties, came under Union occupation for the duration of the wars. The war affected Princess Anne County in many ways. The folks here under the occupation of the Union forces, the fact of the matter was, their husbands, their sons, their grandsons, their nephews, their uncles, all these men in Princess Anne County were all fighting for the Confederacy. And because these folks here were Southern sympathizers to the cause of that war, they suffered dearly at the hands of the Yankees or the Union occupiers in this area. The Union troops would come down here sporadically in small patrols because they didn't meet any resistance here in Princess Anne County. Like I said, all the men folk, other than the younger men and the older men, everybody else was all fighting for the cause. The Union patrols patrolling in and out of the county, they didn't have anything to fear. Edgar really wanted to wash his hands of the war. But when he came back home in January of 1863, of course, Lincoln announced his Proclamation of Emancipation. This set in motion a lot of blacks, free and slaves, running off the plantations here in Princess Anne County to join the colored troops that were being mustered in the city of Norfolk. These partisan ranger companies were mustered into the Confederacy for one purpose, and that was to combat the enemy behind enemy lines. In early spring of 1863, Edgar went to Richmond. He had talked to the Secretary of War for the Confederacy. He had asked the Secretary, could he muster in a partisan ranger company right here in Princess Anne County. Secretary James Seddon agreed in any way they combat the enemy in Southern Territory was a good thing. So he granted Edgar permission to muster in a partisan ranger company. He would wreak havoc on the Yankees, especially the colored troops that were patrolling in and out of Princess Anne County. Union troops in their reports, they would write how guerrilla fighters would come out of nowhere, out of the swamps of Princess Anne County, and inflict considerable damage, mainly the rear of the columns of these men. They would disappear as fast as they would appear. In November of 1863, Colonel Alonzo Draper and his 1st U.S. colored troops came into Princess Anne County. They went to Long Island, the residence of Major Edgar Burroughs. Long Island is in the middle of Back Bay. And they laid in wait for him for 2 days. Major Burroughs did end up going home for some fresh supplies, and when he approached the house, Draper and his troops captured Major Burris. When all was said and done and they had Edgar in shackles and chains that night, that those colored troops literally got down on their hands and knees and prayed to God that the guerrilla Burris had been captured. They imprisoned him. He went to trial for treason, for being in the Confederate Army, tried and sentenced to hang. The 11th hour of the day he was supposed to be hung, something Edgar didn't want to do, but figured he didn't have any choice in the matter, was to sign the oath of allegiance, which would give him a stay of execution. President Lincoln was going to send word down to Butler as to his conditions of his release. Sadly, the night there had been a shooting where Edgar had been taken to, he was shot in the back, mortally wounded, and 24 hours later he would die. What I would like for folks to take from this book, Princess Anne County, Its Contributions and Sacrifices to the War Between the States. Today's society believes they're fighting over, which is slavery. A lot of these people here in Princess Anne County, a lot of these men that went off to fight, they didn't own slaves. They weren't fighting to keep slavery alive. They were fighting for issues that concerned their families, their homes, their way of life. That's what they were fighting for.